A billionaire CEO notices a missing family necklace on a little girl begging for food, with a baby who looks just like him. Before we get started, leave a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Let's begin. The crisp December air bit at Alexander Richardson's face as he stepped out of LeBaron, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. At 38, he commanded an empire worth billions, built through calculated decisions and unwavering focus. Tonight's meeting had secured another lucrative acquisition for Richardson Industries, exactly as he had planned. Alexander adjusted his cashmere coat and checked his Swiss watch. His driver would arrive in precisely 3 minutes. Everything in his life operated with mechanical precision, just the way he preferred it. "Please, just a little food." The soft voice barely registered in his consciousness. New York was full of unfortunate souls, and Alexander had learned long ago that he couldn't help everyone. His charitable foundation donated millions annually. That was his contribution. "Anything helps, please." Something in the voice penetrated his carefully constructed wall of indifference. Alexander glanced sideways, intending a brief acknowledgement before continuing on his path. The woman sat huddled against the building, painfully thin, clutching a bundle to her chest. Her clothes were worn but clean, someone who had clearly known better days. Alexander was about to look away when a pearlescent gleam caught his eye. A necklace. Not just any necklace. A strand of perfectly matched South Sea pearls with an unmistakable diamond and sapphire clasp. His grandmother's necklace, passed through generations of Richardsons, given only to those considered true family. His heart thundered in his chest. It was impossible. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. The woman's head snapped up, and their eyes met. Recognition dawned in her exhausted face, followed instantly by fear. She clutched the bundle tighter and attempted to stand Alexander. Her voice was a mixture of shock and resignation. 2 years. 2 years since she'd vanished from his life without explanation. 2 years of wondering what he'd done wrong, before eventually convincing himself she meant nothing. "What are you?" he began, but his words died as the bundle in her arms moved. A tiny face emerged from the blankets, blinking sleepily at the cold. The child couldn't be more than 18 months old. Alexander's world tilted on its axis as the baby turned toward him with curious eyes of a particular shade of emerald green that had marked Richardson faces for generations. "Is that?" His throat constricted around the impossible question. Olivia pulled back, her face a mixture of defiance and fear. "I need to go." "Wait." Alexander stepped forward, mind racing. The timing, the eyes, the necklace he'd given her in a rare moment of genuine emotion. "Is that my child?" The baby, he couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl, stared at him with unnerving intensity as though recognizing something in his features. The same cleft chin, the same high cheekbones. "Please, Olivia." His voice softened, something that hadn't happened in years. "Just talk to me." She looked up and down the street, clearly searching for escape. "You made your priorities clear 2 years ago, Alexander. Your empire was everything, we were nothing. You disappeared." The accusation burst from him. "You never gave me a chance to—" "A chance?" Bitter laughter escaped her lips. "I gave you hundreds of chances. You missed every one." The bundle in. Her arms began to fuss, tiny hands reaching up to touch Olivia's face. She immediately softened, cooing gentle reassurances. "His name is Ethan," she said quietly, not meeting Alexander's gaze. "And yes, he's your son." The world stopped. In that moment, everything Alexander had built, everything he'd prioritized, everything he'd sacrificed for, it all seemed hollow. A son. He had a son he knew nothing about. "Come inside," he said, gesturing toward the restaurant. "It's freezing out here. Let me get you both something to eat and we can talk." Olivia shook her head. "I don't belong in places like that anymore." "Then, come to my car. It'll be here any minute." Alexander couldn't take his eyes off the child, off Ethan, his son. "Please, Olivia." I need to understand. As if on cue, his sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. The timing was perfect, as always. But for the first time in his meticulously controlled life, Alexander Richardson faced something he couldn't predict, couldn't plan for, couldn't acquire through careful negotiation. The woman he once loved and the child he never knew existed stood before him like ghosts from a different life, and as snow began to fall around them, illuminated by the streetlights like tiny stars descending to earth, Alexander realized that the most important merger of his life was about to take place on this cold Manhattan sidewalk. As Alexander guided Olivia and Ethan toward his waiting car, the past crashed over him like an unexpected wave. The driver's surprised expression at the disheveled woman and baby quickly disappeared behind professional indifference after catching Alexander's warning glance. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked, eyes carefully focused forward. "The Westfield. Cafe 3 blocks down," Alexander replied, choosing a modest establishment where Olivia might feel more comfortable. As the car pulled away from the curb, silence enveloped them, broken only by Ethan's occasional coos. Alexander couldn't stop staring at the child, his son, who was examining the leather interior with fascinated eyes. Those Richardson green eyes. How had he not known? How had this happened? His mind drifted to their first meeting 3 years ago at the Metropolitan Museum's annual gala. Olivia had been the assistant curator, brilliant and passionate about making art accessible to everyone, not just the elite. She'd challenged his donation priorities right to his face, suggesting community programs instead of another wing-bearing. His name? "You're staring," Olivia said quietly, interrupting his thoughts. "I'm trying to understand how I have an 18-month-old son I knew nothing about." Olivia's jaw tightened. 20 months, actually. The timeline aligned perfectly. Their relationship had ended exactly 2 years ago, after a particularly heated argument about his 6-week business trip to Asia. He'd been expanding Richardson Industries into emerging markets, securing his legacy. She'd wanted commitment, stability, a future together. "You were pregnant when you left," he stated, pieces falling into place. "Yes." Her eyes remained fixed on the passing streetlights. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged sharper than intended. Olivia's bitter laugh cut through the car's warmth. "I tried, Alexander. For weeks I called your office. Your assistant always said you were unavailable. Mr. Richardson is in Beijing. Mr. Richardson is in Dubai. Mr. Richardson is in Zurich." Each location struck like an accusation. He had been in those places, securing the Asian market expansion that had increased his net worth by billions. "You could have tried harder," he insisted. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. "I stood outside your building in the rain for 3 hours when I was 7 months pregnant," she whispered. "Your doorman eventually called security." The car stopped outside the cafe, but neither moved to exit. "I had just found out I was losing my apartment that day," she continued. "The museum had already let me go when my pregnancy started showing too much. They cited budget cuts, but we both know that wasn't true." Alexander remembered the museum director, a close friend who had complained about unprofessional staff at a charity dinner. Had he been talking about Olivia? Had Alexander unknowingly contributed to her downfall? When did things get so bad? He asked, glancing at her worn clothes, at the thinness of her face. She looked down at Ethan, now sleeping peacefully against her chest. The recession hit the art world hard. No one was hiring a pregnant woman with no fixed address. After Ethan was born, it got worse. Daycare costs more than most entry-level positions pay. The necklace gleamed against her collarbone, catching the streetlight. The Richardson pearls, his grandmother's prized possession worth a small fortune, should have provided her with months of comfortable living. "Why didn't you sell the necklace?" he asked. Her hand instinctively moved to touch the pearls. "It was the last piece of you," she admitted, vulnerability breaking through her defenses. "And I wanted Ethan to have something of his heritage, even if you weren't in his life." Tonight would have been different, though. He could see it in her eyes. "You were going to sell it tonight, weren't you?" Olivia nodded, tears finally spilling. Over. The shelter is full, it's below freezing, I had no choice. Alexander felt something crack inside him, the protective shell he'd built around his heart since she'd left. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had lost through his own neglect, and what he might have gained had fate not placed him at that exact restaurant on this exact night. Inside the small cafe, Alexander and Olivia sat across from each other at a corner table. Ethan was awake now, quietly playing with a paper napkin while occasionally glancing at Alexander with curious eyes. The waitress had brought them coffee and a plate of pastries that Olivia hadn't touched. "You should eat something," Alexander said, pushing the plate toward her. "I didn't come here for charity," Olivia replied, but her eyes lingered on the food, pride battling with necessity. "It's not charity to feed the mother of my child." The words felt strange on his tongue, my child. A concept so foreign yet undeniably true as he looked at Ethan's features, a perfect blend of them both. Olivia finally took a pastry, breaking off a small piece for Ethan, who accepted it eagerly. Alexander noticed her hands trembling, slightly. "I tried to reach you," she said quietly. "When I found out I was pregnant, I called your office 13 times. 13? Alexander's brow furrowed. "I counted." Her smile was bitter. "Your assistant started recognizing my voice the last time she told me not to call again." Alexander made a mental note to fire Claire immediately. "I never knew." "Would it have mattered?" Olivia challenged. "You were building your Asian expansion. The most critical phase of Richardson Industries' growth, you called it." He remembered those words, the same ones he'd used when she'd asked him to skip the trip and attend her exhibition opening instead. The exhibition she'd worked on for months. "I would have helped," he insisted. "Like you helped when I needed you before?" Her voice remained low but intense. "You were always somewhere else, Alexander. Physically present but mentally calculating your next acquisition." Ethan dropped his napkin and Alexander instinctively reached to pick it up. Their hands brushed as Olivia moved at the same moment. For a heartbeat, the years between them vanished. "What do you want from me now?" Alexander asked, withdrawing his hand. "Money? A place to stay?" Olivia's face hardened. "I don't want anything from you. If we hadn't crossed paths tonight, you still wouldn't know about Ethan. He's my son." "A son you never knew existed until an hour ago," she countered. "A son who's gone 20 months without a father." Alexander felt a surge of anger. "Because you kept him from me. Because you made yourself unreachable." Tears welled in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like to wait in an emergency room for 6 hours with a feverish infant, completely alone? To choose between paying for diapers or dinner? To be turned away from shelters because they're overcrowded?" Each question hit like a physical blow. While he'd been jet-setting between luxury hotels and boardrooms, his child had been struggling to survive. "I didn't know," he repeated, his voice smaller. "No," she agreed. "You didn't know. But you made it impossible to tell you." Ethan reached toward Alexander suddenly, tiny fingers extended. Without thinking, Alexander offered his hand, and the ID boy grabbed his index finger with surprising strength. In that simple touch, everything changed. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he wielded, none of it mattered compared to this small hand holding his finger. "What happens now?" he asked, his eyes locked on his son's face. "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "This wasn't part of my plan." Alexander Richardson, master strategist who never entered a negotiation without knowing exactly how it would end, found himself completely adrift. But for the first time in his adult life, uncertainty didn't terrify him. It felt like possibility. The stark contrast between their lives became painfully apparent as Alexander drove Olivia and Ethan to his penthouse. He'd insisted they stay the night, at least until he could arrange something more permanent. The Bentley glided through Manhattan's streets, a silent bubble of luxury separating them from the harsh winter night. "Where have you been staying?" Alexander asked, watching Ethan doze against Olivia's shoulder. Recently? The women's shelter on 82nd, she answered without emotion. Before that, a friend's couch until she moved. Before that, she shrugged. Wherever was safe. Alexander winced, internally, but kept his face neutral. The thought of his son sleeping in shelters while he had a 10,000 square foot penthouse with 5 empty bedrooms made his stomach turn. The car pulled into the private underground garage of his building. The security guard snapped to attention, opening the door with practiced efficiency. "Welcome back, Mr. Richardson," he said, barely concealing his surprise at Alexander's companions. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor was silent. When the doors opened directly into his penthouse foyer, Olivia's sharp intake of breath was audible. The space was immaculate, all sleek lines, museum-quality art, and panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline, designed to impress, not to live in. Alexander suddenly saw his home through her eyes. Cold, impersonal, a showpiece rather than a sanctuary. "The guest room is this way," he said, leading them down a hallway lined with abstract paintings worth more than most people's homes. He opened the door to reveal a pristine room with its own sitting area and bathroom. But what caught Olivia's attention was the item in the corner, a wooden crib, hand-carved with intricate detail. "Why do you have a crib?" she asked, voice barely above, a whisper. Alexander felt a flush of embarrassment. "My mother," he explained. "She had it delivered last year. Said I wasn't getting any younger and needed to continue the Richardson line. I never had the heart to send it back." The irony hung heavy between them. His mother had been preparing for a grandchild who already existed. Olivia carefully laid Ethan on the bed, surrounding him with pillows to prevent him from rolling off. The little boy clutched his worn teddy bear, a dirty, one-eyed thing that Alexander imagined must be his only constant companion. "I'll have some food sent up," Alexander said, backing toward the door. "And I can find some clothes, toiletries, whatever you need." "Alexander," Olivia's voice stopped him. "What are you doing?" He paused, genuinely confused. "Helping you." "No, this," she gestured between them. "Playing house, acting like we can just pick up after 2 years, like nothing happened." "I'm not." "You are," she interrupted. "You're trying to fix this like you fix everything, throwing money and resources at it until it goes away." Her words hit their mark. It was exactly what he always did, what had made him successful in business and a failure in relationships. "He's my son," Alexander said simply. "And you're." He hesitated. "I'm what?" Olivia challenged. "The woman who disappeared, your ex, the mother of your child, a charity case? You're the woman I never stopped thinking about," he admitted, surprising even himself with the truth. "Even when I convinced myself I had." Olivia looked away first, her defenses momentarily lowered. "One night," she conceded. "We'll stay one night. Tomorrow we figure out something more appropriate." Alexander nodded, knowing not to push. As he left the room, he caught a glimpse of his son sleeping peacefully on the king-sized bed. 20 months lost. 20 months of first smiles, first words, first steps. All moments he would never recover. In his cavernous living room, Alexander poured himself a scotch and looked out at the glittering city below, the empire he'd built, suddenly feeling hollow in comparison to what he'd inadvertently abandoned. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Alexander's penthouse. Olivia stood in the kitchen, watching as Ethan happily devoured the banana slices she'd found in the otherwise empty refrigerator. Alexander entered, already dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what." "The Tokyo office says the meeting can wait," he was saying, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Reschedule everything for the next 3 days." He ended the call and looked up to find Olivia watching him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." He approached cautiously as if she might bolt like a startled deer. "I've missed enough already." Ethan noticed Alexander and offered him a sticky, banana-covered hand in greeting. Alexander hesitated only briefly before accepting it, grimacing slightly as the mush made contact with his immaculate sleeve. "He likes you?" Olivia observed, the faintest smile playing at her lips. "Richardson charm." "It's genetic," Alexander replied, attempting humor to ease the tension. "Olivia, about last night—" "I've been thinking," she interrupted. "We need boundaries, clear ones." Alexander nodded, wiping his hand with a napkin. "I agree. I won't take your money," she stated firmly. "And I won't be controlled." "I understand, but Ethan needs stability," she continued. "I've been saving for an apartment deposit. I'm close, but not there yet." Alexander saw his opening. "I own a building in Chelsea, corporate housing for visiting executives. There's a 2-bedroom unit vacant right now. It's modest by my standards, but comfortable." Olivia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And the rent?" "Consider it child support," he countered. "I've missed 20 months of it." She seemed to weigh her options, pride battling practicality. Ethan chose that moment to bang his sippy cup on the counter, demanding more juice. "Temporary," she finally agreed, "until I find something I can afford on my own." Alexander nodded, knowing better than to push for more. "I'll have my driver take us there this afternoon." A notification chimed on his phone, a reminder of a board meeting he was supposed to attend in 30 minutes. For the first time in his career, Alexander swiped it away without a second thought. "I want to spend time with him today," he said, gesturing toward Ethan. "If that's okay with you." Surprise flickered across Olivia's face. "You're not going to work?" "This is more important." The words felt foreign yet right on his tongue. Later that morning, in the penthouse's spacious living room, Alexander sat on the floor, his Italian suit collecting dust, while Ethan showed him a collection of plastic keys Olivia had produced from her bag. The boy babbled enthusiastically, occasionally forming words like blue and big. "He's talking," Alexander said, awestruck. "He's really talking." "He knows about 30 words," Olivia said, watching from the sofa. "He's ahead of the curve, according to his pediatrician." "Of course he is," Alexander replied with unmistakable pride. "He's a Richardson." Olivia's expression sobered. "He's also a Williams. My family matters too, Alexander." The rebuke was gentle but firm, and Alexander felt appropriately chastened. "You're right. I'm sorry." Ethan suddenly pulled himself up using Alexander's knee and took several wobbly steps toward a colorful toy on the coffee table. When he reached it successfully, he turned with a triumphant grin, a smile so radiant that Alexander felt something crack open inside his chest. "I want to be part of his life, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just financially, really part of it." "I don't want your money," she repeated. "I want him to have a father who's present, if he's going to have any father at all." Alexander met her gaze with newfound determination. "I will be, I promise." As the words left his mouth, his phone rang again, his executive assistant likely wondering why the CEO of Richardson Industries had suddenly gone AWOL. Alexander reached for it, then paused, looking between the phone and his son, with deliberate movement. He turned the phone off completely. The choice had never been clearer. The Chelsea apartment was modest by Alexander's standards, but felt like a palace to Olivia. 2 bedrooms, a bright living area, and a small balcony overlooking a quiet courtyard. It was more than she'd dared hope for in the past 2 years. "The furniture stays with the unit," Alexander explained as he watched Ethan explore the space with toddler enthusiasm. "But we can change anything you don't like." "It's perfect," Olivia said, running her hand over the granite kitchen counter. "I can't remember the last time I had my own kitchen." Alexander's phone rang for the 4th time that hour. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "I have to take this one. It's the Beijing deal." Olivia nodded, unsurprised. Some things never changed. "Richardson," he answered, stepping onto the balcony. Through the glass door, she watched his expression harden into the businessman she remembered. Focused, unyielding, calculating. Ethan tugged at her pant leg, holding up a toy car he'd found under the sofa. Car, he announced proudly. Yes, baby, that's a car. She knelt beside him, grateful for this small being who had become her entire world. This is our new home. What do you think? Home, Ethan repeated, testing the word. Alexander returned, his face troubled. There's a situation in Hong Kong. The acquisition is falling apart. You need to go, Olivia finished for him, the familiar disappointment settling in her chest. To her surprise, Alexander shook his head. I told them to handle it. Jensen can fly out tomorrow if necessary. But isn't this the deal you've been working on for months? It is. His gaze shifted to Ethan, who was now racing the car along the baseboards. But I've missed bigger things. Later that evening, after they'd ordered dinner and Ethan was bathed, Alexander awkwardly attempted to help with the bedtime routine. His inexperience was evident as he struggled with diaper tabs and pajama snaps. How do you do this every night? He asked, finally securing the diaper after the third attempt. Practice, Olivia replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. You'll get better. The simple phrase, implying he would be around for more bedtimes, hung between them, loaded with possibility. As Ethan drifted to sleep in his new room, Alexander and Olivia sat at the kitchen table, 2 cups of tea creating a fragile peace between them. I've arranged interviews at 3 galleries next week, Alexander said. They owe my foundation favors. Olivia stiffened. I don't need your connections. It's not charity, he countered. It's opportunity. You're talented, Olivia. The art world lost something when you stepped away. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. Alexander read it and cursed under his breath. The Hong Kong deal? She asked. No. He looked genuinely distressed. Ethan has a pediatrician appointment tomorrow. I forgot about the board meeting. Olivia smiled sadly. This is the real challenge, Alexander. Not diaper changing. It's the constant choice between your world and his. He stared at his phone, then back at her. What time is the appointment? 9:30. But Alexander, you don't have to. I'll move the meeting, he interrupted, fingers already typing. The board can wait. Olivia watched him, wondering if this new version of Alexander would last. She'd seen glimpses of it during their relationship, moments when the driven businessman gave way to someone capable of genuine connection. But those moments had always been fleeting, quickly swallowed by spreadsheets and acquisitions. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked, catching her gaze. I'm wondering how long this will last before Richardson Industries reclaims your full attention. Instead of defensiveness, Alexander's face showed understanding. I've given that company every minute of my life for 15 years, he said quietly. What do I have to show for it? Numbers in a bank account. A name on a building. He glanced toward Ethan's room where soft baby snores could be heard. I want more than that now. For the first time since their unexpected reunion, Olivia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, people really could change. The spring sunshine bathed Central Park in a golden glow as Alexander spread a checkered blanket beneath a blossoming cherry tree. 2 months had passed since their chance encounter, 2 months of cautious rebuilding and unexpected discoveries. I still can't believe you've never had a proper picnic, Olivia said, unpacking the basket Alexander's chef had prepared. Billionaire Alexander Richardson, eating on the ground like common folk. There's a first time for everything, he replied, his tie loosened and jacket discarded. Small but significant changes in the man who once refused to be seen in public without perfect composure. Ethan toddled nearby, fascinated by the ducks gliding across the pond. At 22 months, he'd grown more expressive each day, his vocabulary expanding rapidly. Alexander had created a document on his phone where he recorded each new word, treating his son's development with the same meticulous attention he once reserved exclusively for market analyses. He's getting fast, Alexander observed as Ethan broke into an unsteady run toward a squirrel. He moved quickly to intercept, scooping the giggling boy into his arms. Olivia watched them, the domestic scene, still surreal after years of struggle. Her gallery position was going well, secured through her own interview, not Alexander's influence as she'd initially feared. The apartment felt like home now, filled with Ethan's toys and her modest art collection. "Swing," Ethan demanded, pointing. "Toward the playground?" Alexander looked to Olivia for permission, something that had become their unspoken arrangement, co-parenting with carefully negotiated boundaries. "Go ahead," she said, smiling. "I'll set up lunch." As she arranged sandwiches on paper plates, Olivia reflected on the changes in Alexander. The man who once checked his phone every 3 minutes now regularly left it behind during their outings. Board meetings were rescheduled around Ethan's doctor appointments. Last week, he'd appeared at her gallery opening, arriving early and staying until the end. At the playground, Alexander was pushing Ethan on the swings, their matching laughs carrying across the distance. Something warm unfurled in Olivia's chest, a feeling she'd carefully guarded against since their reunion. When they returned flushed and happy, Ethan immediately reached for his juice box. "Thirsty, Papa?" he said casually, the word falling from his lips as naturally as breathing. Alexander froze, his eyes meeting Olivia's over their son's head. "He called me Papa," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "It's the first time," she confirmed, equally moved. They ate lunch in companionable silence, interrupted only by Ethan's enthusiastic commentary on passing dogs and clouds. As Olivia reached for the last strawberry, her fingers brushed against Alexander's. The contact was brief but electric, a reminder of what once existed between them. "I've missed this," Alexander said quietly. "Not just Ethan. Us." Olivia withdrew, her hand, years of hurt creating necessary caution. "Alexander, I know," he said quickly. "I know it's not that simple, but I want you to know I've changed, or I'm trying to." "Change takes more than 2 months," she reminded him gently. "I have 20 months to make up for," he replied, "and a lifetime ahead to get it right." Before she could respond, a young woman approached them tentatively. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but aren't you Alexander Richardson?" "The CEO of Richardson Industries." Alexander nodded politely but without his former arrogance. "Would you mind a photo? My dad invested in your company and he's a huge fan." Instead of the irritation such interruptions once provoked, Alexander smiled warmly. "Actually, how about one of all of us? We're having a family day." The word family hung in the air, both a question and a declaration. When the woman returned, to her friends, Alexander pulled out his own phone. "Speaking of photos, can we take one? The 3 of us?" A fellow park-goer obliged, capturing the moment. Ethan between them, all 3 smiling in the dappled sunlight. When Alexander looked at the result, something shifted in his expression. "What is it?" Olivia asked. "I want this framed for my office," he said simply, "to remind me of what actually matters." As the afternoon waned and Ethan dozed on the blanket, between them Olivia allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been fighting. Despite everything, her heart was opening to him again, one careful inch at a time. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Olivia's feet as she hurried toward the small gallery where she'd been working for the past 4 months. Her phone buzzed again, the 3rd call, from Marcus, the gallery owner, in the past hour. Something was wrong. When she arrived, the usually bustling space was eerily quiet. Marcus sat at the reception desk, head in his hands, a stack of papers scattered before him. "What's happening?" Olivia asked, setting down her bag. Marcus looked up, his face ashen. "It's over, Olivia. I've lost everything." Over the next painful hour, Marcus explained how he'd invested the gallery's reserves in a friend's art tech startup that had spectacularly imploded. The upcoming exhibition they'd been planning, Olivia's first major curatorial project since returning to the art world, would be canceled. The gallery would close by the end of the month. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said, genuine regret in his voice. "You were bringing new life to this place." Olivia left in a daze, her carefully reconstructed professional life crumbling, just as it had begun to solidify. Without thinking, she found herself walking to Alexander's office, a 40-story monument to Richardson Industries in Midtown. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Ms. Williams, Mr. Richardson is in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here. No, don't interrupt, Olivia began, but the woman was already dialing. Minutes later, Alexander emerged from the elevator, concern etched on his face. What's wrong? Is Ethan okay? He's fine, he's with the sitter, she assured him. I shouldn't have come, you're busy. I'm never too busy for you, he said simply, guiding her to his private elevator. Tell me what happened. In his office, a sprawling space with views of Central Park, Olivia explained the gallery's collapse. As she spoke, Alexander's expression changed from concern to calculation. I could buy it, he said when she finished. The gallery, it would be simple. Absolutely not. Olivia stood abruptly. Olivia, be reasonable. I have the resources. I'm not going to be another acquisition, Alexander. The words burst forth with unexpected force. Not everything can be fixed by throwing money at it. That's not what I'm doing, he protested. Isn't it? She paced the length of his office. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I'm finally standing on my own feet, building something for myself and Ethan, and at the first obstacle you want to swoop in and solve it with your checkbook. Alexander's jaw tightened, the CEO re-emerging. I'm trying to help. By making me dependent on you? By turning my career into another subsidiary of Richardson Industries? Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. I won't be your charity case. You're being stubborn, he said, frustration evident. Think of the practical benefits. I am thinking practically, she interrupted, about how it would feel to walk into that gallery every day knowing I didn't earn it, knowing everyone else thinks I only have it because of who I'm. She stopped herself. Because of who you're what? Alexander pressed her. Sleeping with, she finished bluntly. That's what they'd think. The woman who trapped Alexander Richardson with a baby and got a gallery as a consolation prize. The harsh words landed between them like physical blows. Alexander stepped back, genuinely stunned. Is that what you think I see when I look at you? At us? Olivia sighed, suddenly exhausted. No, but it doesn't matter what you see. It's about what I need to see when I look at myself. Understanding finally dawned in his eyes. Your independence matters that much. It's all I have that's truly mine, she admitted. Well, that and Ethan. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, an internal struggle playing across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, more thoughtful. What if I helped without buying? What if I connected you with people who might invest in the gallery or offer you a position elsewhere? No strings attached, no Richardson name involved. Olivia studied his face, searching for the controlling businessman she'd once known. Instead, she found only genuine concern. That, she said carefully, I might consider. As winter approached, the Chelsea apartment transformed alongside its occupants. Children's artwork now adorned the refrigerator, family photos lined the hallway, and a small Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, evidence of the life they were cautiously building together. Alexander had kept his word. Instead of purchasing the gallery outright, he'd connected Olivia with legitimate investors through mutual contacts, carefully removing himself from the negotiations. The gallery had reopened under new ownership with Olivia as head curator, her talent recognized on its own merit. Tonight was different, though. After months of careful boundaries and separate residences, Alexander had invited Olivia and Ethan to dinner at his family estate in Westchester, an introduction that signified something deeper than co-parenting. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked as Alexander drove them through the iron gates of the Richardson estate. Snow dusted the expansive grounds, making the Georgian mansion look like something from a holiday card. They're going to love you, Alexander assured her, though his white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel betrayed his own nervousness. Well, Mother will. Thomas might take some convincing. Ethan, now 2 years old and increasingly verbal, pressed, his face against the window. Big house, he observed, eyes wide. It's where I grew up, Alexander explained. Where your grandmother lives. Olivia smoothed her dress, a simple but elegant emerald piece she'd purchased with her first curator's paycheck. The pearl necklace rested against her collarbone, a tangible link between past and present. Eleanor Richardson greeted them at the door, a striking woman in her 60s, with Alexander's piercing green eyes. Her gaze went immediately to Ethan. "Oh, my," she breathed, kneeling despite her designer dress. "Hello, young man." Ethan, usually shy with strangers, stepped forward confidently. "I'm Ethan," he announced, extending his hand as Alexander had taught him. Eleanor's laughter filled the entryway as she took his small hand. "I'm your grandmother, Eleanor. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." Her eyes lifted to Olivia, and for a moment the younger woman braced herself for judgment. Instead, Eleanor rose and embraced her warmly. "Thank you for bringing him into our lives," she whispered. "Both of you." Dinner was less intimidating than Olivia had feared. Alexander's brother Thomas, younger by 5 years and more casually dressed, initially regarded her with suspicion. But by dessert, Ethan had won him over by solemnly offering to share his chocolate cake. "He has your stubborn chin," Thomas told Alexander, but thank God he got his mother's charm. After Ethan had been tucked into bed in Alexander's old room, the adults gathered in the library for drinks. The conversation flowed naturally until Eleanor made an innocent comment about Olivia's lovely little apartment. "It's perfect for us," Olivia replied, feeling Alexander tense beside her. "But surely," Eleanor continued, "it would make more sense for all of you to be together. This house is enormous and Alexander's penthouse has plenty of room." "Mother," Alexander warned. "What? I'm merely suggesting what's practical. Ethan should grow up in a proper home with both parents." "My home is proper," Olivia said quietly but firmly. "And Alexander has been wonderfully present for Ethan while respecting my independence." Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. "Of course. I apologize if I overstepped." Later, as they prepared to leave, Alexander surprised everyone by defending Olivia when his mother made another well-intentioned but elitist remark about Olivia's gallery being in a transitional neighborhood. "Actually, Mother, Olivia's gallery is showing artists no one else has the vision to discover. Her last exhibition sold out completely. The neighborhood is lucky to have her." The drive back to the city was quiet, Ethan asleep in his car seat. When they arrived at the Chelsea apartment, Alexander carried his son inside and helped settle him in bed. "Thank you," Olivia said as they stood in the kitchen afterward, "for what you said to your mother." "I only told the truth," he replied. "You're extraordinary, Olivia. You always have been." The compliment hung between them, honest and unembellished. Alexander reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been thinking," he said, carefully, "about what my mother said." Olivia stiffened slightly. "Alexander, not about moving in together," he clarified quickly. "About Ethan having both parents in his life, properly. He does have both of us. I know, but I was wondering." He took a deep breath. "Would you and Ethan like to come to Aspen for Christmas? My family has a lodge there. Separate rooms, of course," he added hastily. "I just thought it would be nice for Ethan to have a real family Christmas, for all of us to be together." The invitation was more than a holiday proposal. It was a step toward a future neither had dared imagine 6 months ago. Olivia looked at him, this new Alexander who had learned to listen, to compromise, to put others first. For the first time since their reunion, she allowed herself to truly believe in the possibility of them. "I think," she said slowly, "that would be wonderful." The Aspen trip had transformed something between them. Now, 3 months later, Alexander sat in his penthouse office, the family photo from Central Park prominently displayed beside his computer. He traced the pearl necklace in the image with his finger, lost in thought when his phone rang. "The Hong Kong investors are getting impatient," Jensen, his COO, reported. "They want an answer by tomorrow." "I'll call them personally," Alexander promised, ending the call just as the elevator announced, "A visitor." Olivia and Ethan entered, the boy immediately racing toward him with outstretched arms. "Papa, we saw ducks." Alexander scooped him up, business concerns momentarily forgotten. "Did they quack at you?" "I quacked at them," Ethan demonstrated enthusiastically. Olivia smiled at their interaction. "Sorry to interrupt your workday. His play date canceled and he insisted on seeing you." "Never apologize for this," Alexander said, meaning it completely. Later, after they'd built a fort from sofa cushions and Ethan had fallen asleep for his afternoon nap, Alexander found Olivia in his bedroom. She stood before his dresser, fingers gently touching the velvet box where he kept family heirlooms. "I was looking for tissues," she explained, slightly embarrassed. "It's fine," he assured her, opening the box. Inside lay several Richardson treasures. His grandfather's pocket watch, his father's cufflinks, and an empty velvet impression where the pearl necklace had once rested. "I never asked you about it," Olivia said quietly. "Why you gave me the necklace that night?" Alexander's mind traveled back 3 years, to the evening at his Hamptons house when he'd impulsively retrieved the family treasure from its vault. "It was the anniversary of my father's death," he recalled. "You'd listened to me talk about him all evening, really listened. Not like others who were just waiting for their turn to speak." He closed his eyes, remembering. "You said something about how we carry those we love with us, not just in memories but in small gestures, habits we inherit without realizing." It made me feel like he wasn't really gone. Olivia nodded, remembering that intimate conversation. "The necklace was supposed to go to the woman I would marry," Alexander continued. 5 generations of Richardson men have given it to their wives. But that night, I couldn't imagine anyone deserving it more than you." Olivia touched the pearls at her throat. "I almost sold it once," she admitted. "The night before you found us. Ethan had been sick and the shelter was full." "Why didn't you?" "I couldn't part with it," she said simply. "It felt like the last piece of you. Something for Ethan to have someday, a connection to his heritage." Alexander took her hand gently. "When I was growing up, my grandfather told me this necklace was the Richardson family's greatest treasure, worth more than any building or company." "It must be worth a fortune," Olivia mused. "The appraisal says $2 million. Alexander smiled at her shocked expression. "But that's not what makes it valuable. My grandfather was right about it being our greatest treasure, but not for the reason I thought." "What do you mean?" "This necklace brought me back to you both," he said softly. "If you hadn't been wearing it that night, I might have walked right past. Ethan might have grown up never knowing his father. I might have spent my life accumulating wealth that meant nothing." Outside the bedroom, they could hear Ethan beginning to stir from his nap. "Maybe that's what made it valuable all along," Alexander continued. "Not the pearls themselves, but their ability to connect generations, to bring people together." Olivia's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "You've changed, Alexander. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better." She reached up to touch his face, a gesture of tenderness they had cautiously allowed back into their relationship. "The man who gave me this necklace was generous, but distracted, always looking toward the next achievement. The man standing here now is present, fully present." Before Alexander could respond, Ethan's voice called from the living room. "Mama, Papa." They moved together toward their son, the necklace catching the afternoon light. No longer just a valuable antique, but a symbol of what they had lost and found again. The late spring sun streamed through the windows of Alexander's office as he reviewed the final documents for the Asian expansion, a project 5 years in the making. The tech giant Tech Fusion had finally agreed to partner with Richardson Industries, offering Alexander what he'd once considered the opportunity of a lifetime, establishing a dominant presence in the emerging markets of Singapore, Hong Kong, and beyond. There was just one condition. He would need to relocate to Singapore for a minimum of 2 years to personally oversee the merger. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the family photo on his desk. A year ago, this decision would have been automatic. His empire had always come first. Now everything was different. Ethan had just turned 2.5, developing his own personality daily. The thought of missing those precious moments made his chest tighten, his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Richardson, your 3 o'clock is here. Send her in," he replied, putting aside the contract. Olivia entered, looking radiant in a professional navy dress. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted, not quite back together, but far more than co-parents. There was an ease between them now, built on renewed trust and shared priorities. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting down her portfolio. The Chicago gallery called again. Alexander's interest peaked. "And?" "They've officially offered me the curator position for their modern American exhibition." Pride colored her voice. "It's exactly the opportunity I've been waiting for, a chance to showcase underrepresented artists on a major platform." "Olivia, that's incredible." Alexander's genuine enthusiasm was tempered only by the realization that Chicago was nearly 1,000 miles from New York. When would it start? "That's the thing." She sat across from him, excitement mixed with apprehension. "They need me there by next month for preliminary selections. The exhibition opens in fall." "Next month," Alexander repeated, the Singapore contract suddenly heavy on his desk. "That's soon." Olivia studied his expression. "What is it? You look troubled." Alexander hesitated, then slid the Tech Fusion contract across to her. "This came through today. The Asian expansion I've been working toward for years." She scanned the document, her expression sobering as she reached the relocation clause. "Singapore, for 2 years. Minimum," he confirmed. The silence between them grew weighted with unspoken implications. This was precisely the scenario that had driven them apart before, career ambitions pulling in opposite directions with no compromise in sight. "We're at a crossroads again," Olivia finally said. "It seems we are." Alexander stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline he'd helped shape. "A year ago, I would have signed this without hesitation. And now?" He turned to face her. "Now I can't imagine missing 2 years of Ethan's life. I can't imagine not seeing you both every day." Olivia joined him at the window, close but not touching. "When I got the Chicago offer, my first thought wasn't celebration. It was wondering how to tell you, how we could make it work so Ethan wouldn't lose what he's gained with you." Alexander felt something shift between them, the beginning of a solution neither would have considered before. "What if," he began carefully, "we approach this differently this time? Not as separate individuals making unilateral decisions, but together." "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I restructure the Singapore deal? Send Jensen to oversee the initial setup while I commute monthly? And what if Richardson Industries establishes a presence in Chicago, where I could work while you curate your exhibition?" Olivia looked genuinely surprised. "You'd do that? Restructure your company around our family?" The word family hung in the air between them, acknowledging what they had become. "A year ago I wouldn't have," Alexander admitted. "But now I understand what matters. What truly matters." Olivia's eyes glistened with unexpected emotion. "I never thought I'd hear Alexander Richardson talk about compromising his business vision for anything." He took her hand gently. "It's not a compromise when you're gaining something more valuable." For a moment they stood in silence, hands linked as they considered the possibility of finding a solution together, something neither had believed possible when they'd parted ways years before. "So," Alexander ventured, "shall we figure this out? Together?" Olivia's smile held both caution and hope. "Together sounds good. It sounds right." As the afternoon light bathed the office in gold, the two contracts lay side by side on Alexander's desk, symbols of their individual accomplishments and the mutual future they might build, if they were brave enough to chart a different course than before. Later that evening, as they watched Ethan build an elaborate block tower in Olivia's apartment, Alexander found himself contemplating not just their careers but the life they might create, if they truly committed to finding solutions rather than accepting inevitable separations. The path forward wouldn't be simple, but for the first time, Alexander Richardson was ready to redesign his empire around something far more precious than profit margins or market share. He was ready to build around love. The Richardson Industries boardroom fell silent as Alexander finished speaking. 12 faces stared back at him with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. He had just announced his decision to restructure the entire Asian expansion project, delegating the Singapore operations to Jensen while establishing a new Chicago office that would serve as his base for the foreseeable future. "Let me understand this correctly," said Frederick Thornton, the oldest board member and Alexander's father's closest friend. "You're passing on personally overseeing our most significant expansion in company history because you want to be in Chicago?" Alexander met his gaze steadily. "I'm not passing on anything. I'm redistributing responsibilities to maximize efficiency across multiple projects." "This isn't about efficiency," Thornton pressed. "Tech Fusion specifically requested your presence in Singapore. They want the Richardson at the helm, not a surrogate." "Jensen has been with this company for 15 years, Alexander countered. "He understands the Asian markets better than I do." "But he doesn't have your name," another board member interjected. "This feels impulsive." Alexander opened a folder and slid documents across the polished table. "These are the revised projections for the next 5 years, accounting for our simultaneous expansion into both markets. As you can see, the profit margins remain virtually unchanged, with potential for increased growth in the Midwest sector." The room filled with the sound of rustling papers as the board reviewed his meticulously prepared data. Alexander watched them, remembering nights spent creating these projections while Ethan slept in the next room and Olivia worked on her exhibition plans. They'd developed this solution together, each making compromises to support the other's dreams. "The numbers look solid," admitted Caroline Wright, the CFO. "But I have to ask, why Chicago specifically? We have no existing infrastructure there." Alexander had prepared for this question. Chicago represents an untapped market for our technological innovations, particularly in the education and healthcare sectors. The University of Chicago has already expressed interest in a partnership. He didn't mention Olivia's exhibition, or how they'd spent hours researching neighborhoods with good preschools for Ethan. Some aspects of his decision remained personal. "This is highly unconventional," Thornton said finally, setting down the projections. "Your father would have never—" "My father," Alexander interrupted calmly, "built this company to create a legacy. I've spent 15 years expanding that legacy, often at great personal cost. Now I'm ensuring its continuity while balancing other priorities." "Other priorities," Thornton repeated, understanding dawning in his eyes. "This is about the boy. Your son." Alexander nodded. "Partly. It's about recognizing that my true legacy isn't just this company. It's also my family." The word hung in the air, an acknowledgement of how his priorities had shifted. "A year ago," he continued, "I would have moved to Singapore without a second thought. I would have missed my son's early years, sacrificed relationships, all for quarterly projections and market share." He gestured to the family photo now prominently displayed alongside his corporate awards. "I'm not that person anymore." After an hour of questions and debate, the board reluctantly approved his proposal. As they filed out, Thornton lingered behind. "Your father would be proud," the older man said unexpectedly. "Not of the business decision, he might have questioned that, but of the man you've become. He always regretted missing so much of your childhood for this company." That evening, Alexander arrived at Olivia's apartment earlier than usual, carrying champagne and takeout from their favorite restaurant. Ethan greeted him with a running leap into his arms. "Papa home early," he exclaimed, planting a sloppy kiss on Alexander's cheek. "Yes, I am," Alexander agreed, savoring the simple joy of his son's embrace. "I'll be home early more often now." Later, after Ethan was asleep, Alexander and Olivia sat on her small balcony, glasses of champagne in hand. "The board approved everything," he told her. "We open the Chicago office next month. Jensen leaves for Singapore the following week. And they're really okay with you commuting?" "They didn't have much choice," Alexander admitted with a smile. "But the numbers support the decision. It's sound business, just unconventional. Olivia studied him in the soft evening light. A year ago, you would never have proposed something unconventional to your board. A year ago, I didn't understand what I was missing. He reached for her hand. When they asked why Chicago, I gave them market projections and partnership opportunities. You didn't tell them about the exhibition? Some things are just for us, he said simply. Our family, our decisions. The word family settled comfortably between them. No longer hypothetical, but real and growing stronger each day. To new beginnings, Olivia said, raising her glass. In Chicago and beyond. As they clinked glasses, Alexander marveled at how his definition of success had transformed. The empire he'd spent his life building now seemed hollow compared to the family he was creating, not through acquisition or investment, but through love, compromise, and presence. The Chicago townhouse was nothing like Alexander's Manhattan penthouse. 3 bedrooms instead of 6, a modest garden rather than panoramic city views, and warm, lived-in spaces instead of museum-like perfection. It was, in every way that mattered, a home. "What do you think, buddy?" Alexander asked as Ethan raced through the rooms, exploring his new territory with unbridled enthusiasm. "My room has stars," the little boy exclaimed, pointing to the ceiling, where Olivia had carefully applied glow-in-the-dark constellations. "So it does," Alexander agreed, catching Olivia's eye with a smile. The astronomical touch had been her idea, a way to make the transition easier for their son. Their son? The phrase still filled him with wonder, even after months of co-parenting. Now with the 3 of them under one roof, it felt official in a way it hadn't before. The decision to live together had come naturally after securing both the Chicago gallery position and opening the new Richardson Industries office. Alexander had insisted on finding a place they chose together, somewhere that belonged to both of them equally with no ghosts of his former life. "The movers are asking about the piano," Olivia called from downstairs. "They're not sure it will fit through the doorway." "Tell them to use the bay window," Alexander replied, remembering how his own mother's piano had been moved into their family home when he was a child. Later that evening, after the movers had departed and they'd ordered pizza, another departure from Alexander's former life of personal chefs, they sat in their partially furnished living room, surrounded by boxes. "This feels surreal," Olivia admitted, watching Ethan arrange his toys in elaborate patterns on the hardwood floor. "If someone had told me a year ago that we'd be here, I would have called them delusional," Alexander finished with a chuckle. And yet here we are. His phone buzzed with a message from Jensen in Singapore. The Asian deal was proceeding smoothly, with only minor adjustments needed to the original plan. Alexander sent a brief reply, then deliberately set the phone aside. Another new habit he was cultivating. "The gallery space is even better than the photos," Olivia said, changing the subject. "You should see it. The lighting is perfect for the installation pieces." "I'd love to." "Tomorrow?" She nodded, still amazed at how easily he now adjusted his schedule around their family. 3 days a week, Alexander worked remotely from their home office. The other 2, he went to the new Richardson Industries Chicago headquarters, but never stayed past 5. It was a seismic shift from the workaholic who had once regularly canceled plans for last-minute business emergencies. Alexander watched Ethan playing, struck by how quickly children adapted. In the 3-year-old's world, this was simply how things were supposed to be. Mama and Papa together, making decisions as a unit, creating a space that belonged to all of them. As Ethan's bedtime approached, they established their new routine. Bath time with both parents helping, story time in the newly decorated bedroom, and goodnight kisses from Mama and Papa. With their son finally settled beneath his glowing stars, Alexander and Olivia retreated to the porch swing in their small backyard. "So this is normal family life," Alexander mused, gently pushing the swing with his foot. "I like it more than I expected." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, a casual intimacy that had returned to their relationship gradually over the months. "It suits you, surprisingly." "Why surprisingly?" Because the Alexander I knew before lived for boardrooms and business deals. He measured success in acquisitions and profit margins. He was missing the point entirely, Alexander said softly, taking her hand in his. The simple gesture felt more intimate than any business handshake sealing a billion-dollar deal. In the quiet of their new backyard, surrounded by moving boxes and the beginnings of their shared life, Alexander realized the perfect moment had arrived. Unplanned and unpretentious. "Marry me, Olivia," he said, the words emerging without rehearsal or grand gestures. She turned to face him, searching his eyes for any trace of the old Alexander, the man who made decisions based on strategy rather than emotion. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied. "Not because it's practical or advantageous, but because I love you. I never stopped." The Chicago Art Institute's modern wing buzzed with anticipation. Tonight marked the opening of Resilience: American Voices in Transition, Olivia's first major curatorial project since returning to the art world, and her most ambitious work to date. Artists previously overlooked by the mainstream art establishment were finally receiving the spotlight they deserved. In the gallery's private room, Olivia adjusted her simple black dress, fingers unconsciously finding the pearl necklace at her throat. After months of preparation, careful curation, and late nights, her vision was finally materializing. The space had been transformed into a journey through contemporary American experiences, challenging, beautiful, and painfully honest. "The Times critic is here," her assistant whispered, "and the collector from New York you wanted to meet." Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath. Her gaze drifted to her engagement ring, a simple emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, so different from what the old Alexander might have chosen. He had selected it carefully, explaining that he wanted something that represented growth and new beginnings rather than just monetary value. Speaking of Alexander, he was conspicuously absent. He'd texted an hour ago about an emergency with Ethan, who had developed a sudden fever. Their nanny had called, and Alexander had immediately left his office to pick up their son from preschool. "Nothing serious," he'd assured her. "Just a cold. We'll be there soon." But the exhibition was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, and there was still no sign of them. Olivia fought against the familiar twinge of disappointment. The ghost of broken promises passed. This was different, she reminded herself. Alexander had changed. This was about their child, not work. "Ms. Williams, we should begin the introductions. Soon," the gallery director prompted gently. Olivia nodded, pushing aside her concern. "Of course. Let's start welcoming the guests." As the room filled with art critics, collectors, and fellow curators, Olivia fell into her professional role with practiced ease. She guided conversations, explained her curatorial choices, and connected artists with potential patrons. Yet part of her attention remained on the entrance, watching for Alexander's arrival. 40 minutes into the event, just as she was preparing to give her formal address, the crowd parted. Alexander appeared, looking slightly disheveled but handsome in his suit, carrying a sleepy Ethan who was bundled in a blanket. "I'm so sorry," he whispered when he reached her side. "His fever spiked, and I wanted to be sure it wasn't anything serious before bringing him out. The doctor said it's just a cold, but he insisted on coming to Mama's party." Relief and love washed over Olivia as she touched Ethan's flushed cheek. "You should have stayed home with him. He needs rest." "And miss your triumph? Not a chance." Alexander's eyes swept the gallery, taking in the impressive display. "Besides, he threatened a full meltdown if we didn't come see your artwork." Ethan lifted his head from Alexander's shoulder, eyes bright despite his illness. "I wanted to see the pretty pictures," he explained solemnly. The gallery director approached, smiling at the family tableau. "Ms. Williams, we're ready for your address whenever you are." Olivia hesitated, looking between her professional obligations and her son's feverish face. "Go," Alexander encouraged. "Your moment deserves to be celebrated. We'll be right here cheering." "You on?" As Olivia stepped onto the small platform to address the gathered crowd, she caught sight of Alexander moving to the back of the room, still holding Ethan and pointing out different pieces to him in hushed tones. Despite his illness, their son was watching her with unmistakable pride. Her speech flowed naturally, explaining her vision for breaking barriers in the art world and creating spaces for voices often relegated to the margins. When she finished, to enthusiastic applause, her gaze found Alexander's across the room. The look of pure admiration in his eyes mirrored exactly how she felt seeing him there. The powerful CEO who had rearranged both his company and his priorities to be present for what mattered. Later, as the event wound down and Ethan dozed in, Alexander's arms they found a quiet moment near the exhibition's centerpiece, a striking mixed-media installation representing interconnected journeys. "This is incredible, Olivia," Alexander said, genuine awe in his voice. "You've built something extraordinary here." "So have you," she replied, gesturing to the Richardson Industries Chicago office, visible through the museum's windows across the park. "We both have." Alexander shifted Ethan's weight, looking thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never crossed paths that night in New York? If I'd walked out a different door of that restaurant?" Olivia touched the pearl necklace, the talisman that had changed everything. "I used to believe some things were just bad timing. Now I think." She met his gaze, the truth crystallizing between them. Some people are destined to find each other, no matter how many detours life throws in their path. As Alexander leaned forward to kiss her, their sleeping son nestled between them, Olivia realized they had both traveled precisely the journey they needed to arrive at this moment. Stronger, wiser, and finally ready to build something that would outlast any business empire or art exhibition, a true family. A year had passed since the Chicago exhibition. Spring sunshine warmed the garden of their townhouse where guests gathered to celebrate Ethan's 4th birthday. The backyard had been transformed into a miniature safari, complete with animal-shaped balloons and a cake featuring Ethan's current obsession, lions. Alexander watched his son run among his preschool friends, his laughter carrying across the garden. Nearby, Olivia directed caterers with the same quiet confidence she brought to her gallery work. Her simple white sundress complemented the pearls at her throat, the necklace now as much a part of her as her smile. "Quite the change from boardroom negotiations," Eleanor Richardson remarked, joining her son. "You seem happy?" "I am," Alexander replied simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible." His mother patted his hand approvingly. "Your father would have been proud. He always wanted this for you, though he never knew how to show it." Alexander nodded, understanding his father better now that he was a parent himself. "It took me too long to realize what truly matters." Across the garden, Olivia caught his eye and smiled. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach, a private gesture they'd shared for the past 4 months as they kept their secret. Their daughter would arrive in late summer, a sister for Ethan, and another chapter in their unexpected journey. The Chicago venture had proved remarkably successful. Richardson Industries had established a strong Midwestern presence, while the Singapore expansion flourished under Jensen's capable leadership. Alexander traveled internationally just once a quarter, maintaining the global connections without sacrificing his family life. Even more fulfilling was the Richardson-Williams Foundation they'd established 6 months after their wedding, focused on supporting single parents facing housing insecurity. The foundation had already helped dozens of families find stability. The program included affordable housing initiatives, child care assistance, and job placement services, all inspired by Olivia's own journey. "Cake time," Ethan announced, racing toward Alexander with sticky fingers. "Daddy, it's cake time." As Alexander lifted his son onto his shoulders, he caught sight of Thomas filming the moment. His brother had become an enthusiastic uncle, regularly flying in from New York for family gatherings. Another relationship healed in the wake of Alexander's transformation. The guests gathered around the picnic table as Olivia brought out the elaborate lion cake. 4 candles flickered in the gentle breeze. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Olivia encouraged as Ethan prepared to blow out the candles. The boy closed his eyes in theatrical concentration before extinguishing the flames with one determined breath. The adults applauded while the children clamored for their slices. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, a journalist approached them. Richardson Industries had recently been featured in Business Weekly for its innovative family-friendly policies, another of Alexander's initiatives inspired by his personal journey. "Mr. Richardson, Ms. Williams," the woman began, "your story has captivated our readers. The billionaire and the struggling artist reunited by chance and now partners in both life and philanthropy. Would you share what you consider the most valuable aspect of your remarkable journey?" Alexander glanced at Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. He gestured toward the pearl necklace she wore. "I grew up believing this necklace was our family's most precious heirloom," he explained. "It's been in the Richardson family for 5 generations, present at every significant milestone." His fingers brushed the pearls gently. "But I was wrong about its value. The true treasure isn't the necklace itself, but the family it helped reunite." The journalist seemed touched by his sincerity. "And you, Ms. Williams? What would you say was the turning point in your story?" Olivia's gaze found Ethan, now dozing against Eleanor's shoulder, exhausted from his celebration. "Learning that sometimes the longest detours lead exactly where you're meant to be." That evening, after the guests had departed and Ethan was tucked beneath his glowing stars, Alexander and Olivia sat on their porch swing, hands intertwined in comfortable silence. "We should frame that photo Thomas took today," Olivia suggested. "The one with all 3 of us by the cake, soon to be 4. Alexander replied, his hand finding her growing belly. As twilight deepened into night, they remained together on the swing, the pearls gleaming softly in the gathering darkness. The necklace that had once been valued for its monetary worth now held something far more precious, the story of loss, discovery, and redemption that had brought them full circle. In the quiet of their Chicago garden, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Alexander Richardson finally understood the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't about buildings bearing his name or acquisitions that expanded his empire. It was about the love that transformed him, the family that completed him, and the future they would build. One day, one choice, one moment of presence at a time. In the end, the most valuable inheritance wasn't what could be locked in a vault or displayed in a boardroom. It was the capacity to recognize what truly mattered before it was too late, a lesson worth more than all the pearls in the world.